good introduction. Myrtis?
Well, for me, I really took an unorthodox approach to becoming part of the arts. Alva Binder is responsible for that. She and I, one afternoon, were having lunch, celebrating a successful meeting, and the restaurant was next door to a gallery. And I knew several fine artists, and I said to her, gee, I wonder what it takes to get a show in the gallery. And so I contemplated the thought, she goes, go ask, I dare you. So, me being me, so I don't know what dares me to do anything. So I went next door and asked. I followed up as directed by the director of the gallery and was able to secure an exhibition for the artist. Well, my friend, being my friend, called all her artist friends, and there were many, and said, Myrtis is representing artists. And I said, no, I'm not. I just helped one person secure a show. So it really grew from there, and I took it very seriously, went back to school, took more art classes, and then went on to MICA. What I realized is that there was a tremendous void in the need for artist development. And my background is in business, and so I use, in marketing specifically, and so I use my marketing skills and business skills to help the artists secure shows in various galleries and museum exhibitions, and really that's where it began. That was the incubator, and it just grew from there.
Okay, so were there previous art collectors in your past that influenced you to get into the field of art or to continue your work in the field of art?
There was no one that started me off, but there were certain, I felt that it was inevitable. You know, I felt I was an artist myself, and I wanted to work with artists, and I found artists pretty much the most interesting people I knew. So, but there were people like Joan Hisaoka who helped me enormously. She really taught me a lot and spent a lot of time with me, and went through her flat files, would let me borrow work to show to clients when I had very little experience. And then I had a gallery on King Street for a while, and people like Margaret Cranking, who was an amazing watercolorist. She was way beyond who would normally show with me, really just helped me enormously and was very, very supportive of me and really a mentor in a lot of ways. So there were people who helped me along, certainly, but I just couldn't imagine doing anything else. It's really interesting. I don't know how people go from career to career to career. You know, I just don't think I could change. And the interesting thing about what you say is that I consider my clients who I represent and the collections that I build. So I don't represent artists at all, and never have. So it's a totally opposite experience. Yeah.
But you're engaging with the artist equally.
Right. But my loyalty is really to the collection and making it represent what I think it should.
Well, I guess for me, the collector who influenced me most would be my father. I grew up in a home with beautiful original works of art. And I think it was probably around my mid-teens when I realized that the aesthetic in my home was very different from that of my friends, whose houses were, the walls were covered with, and I shouldn't say covered, but what was featured on their walls were pictures of Malcolm X and John F. Kennedy and Black Jesus and Martin Luther King. And my aesthetic was very different, and my father passed away more than 30 years ago, but my mother, in the last couple of years, has begun to gift me with works from their collection, which I really am very grateful for. And so I believe that that is probably my greatest influence. I didn't seek to become an art dealer and collector by profession. You know, that was not my career path, and not what I sought to do. I was going to be a CPA, is what I was going to become. But I'm so glad that, you know, with Alva's Dare, that I found myself surrounded by wonderful creative people, and I have had so many wonderful experiences. You know, the arts have enriched my life in ways that I can't imagine, and brought a wonderful person into my life, Alex. So I really love being a part of this and all that it's brought me.
That's great. I mean, I know for me, I came from it from like an art perspective, where I was practicing art, and I was specializing in prints, and so I was doing lithography for many years, and it's really intensive, and it was really, I loved being around just that energy, like you said. It's just like the most fascinating, creative, passionate people. And what I ended up realizing is that my skills were better set helping them to sort of make those connections and take their talent further. I mean, I was more enraptured with what they were creating than what I was producing. So then I sort of switched over to that side, but that's sort of my entree, which is three different approaches.
It is. Well, in our house, the most artistic thing was a photograph of Dulles Airport. Nothing. I kept explaining to my parents what I was going to do, and they're like, we're going to support you for the rest of our lives. I said, well, you very well may. We're just going to do what we're going to do.
Well, there's your service to the client, your family, almost like filling those walls.
Exactly.
Yeah, really interesting. Okay, so you guys are immersed in this art world. Obviously, you're encountering tons of artists. But what was your first piece of art that you purchased as collectors or art appreciators?
I was in college, and they had one of those traveling shows that comes around, and it was a little etching by Eric Gill of a mother and child, and I still have it and just love it. It was $35. Yeah,
I love that.
yeah, it was great. To me, it just you have to just not be able to live without it, and that's the way. Yeah.
Great.
I think for me, the most meaningful work of art that I've purchased early on in my collecting is a piece by a South African artist, Winston Solly. And it is, to me, just breathtakingly beautiful, and I really love it. So I know that I purchased works before that, but in terms of the emotional response that I had to the piece, that has stayed with me. Each time I look at it, I am reminded of why I purchased it, why I wanted to live with it.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the piece.
It's great. I mean, I know for me it's a really small piece. Like, it was probably $50, and that felt like a huge commitment when I got it. But it's a work by a local artist named Christian Tribistone. And he finds found materials and he draws on it, but there was sort of this raw creativity in it that I was just like, I need to have that. But it's the same thing, it's sort of this like primal pull of, if I don't have it, I'm going to regret it, and I'm always going to miss it, and it's always going to be in my mind, and I'll be looking for it.
And that does happen.
Yeah, there's pieces I still remember
Me too.
that are just forever gone, and you'll never find them. Yeah, so it's such a gut reaction. And my training is actually, I have a master's degree from Christie's Auction House. And so a lot of people that we would encounter would come to us for financial investing. And in the entire time I was there, they could never come up with an actual piece that they would say, this will be a direct correlation with an investment. You will get a direct investment back on this piece. And what they said is really the best way to invest is to go with your gut. You have to be drawn to something subjectively and by your taste, and that's really the best investment. And if you're lucky, it accrues value over time. And the most successful investors are those who just listen to their gut. So I guess we're all listening to our gut, and that took that first piece.
Well, I used to, when I was first starting serious consulting, and before I was doing healthcare, I used to go to Art Expo every year. And for like 25 years ago, I went for a couple of years. And I would buy works, and I'd be able to mark it up, double it, and then sell it to my clients. And I would end up talking them out of it because I didn't have a connection with the artist. I didn't know the story behind it. It was just something, decorative. So I thought, well, it's foolish to continue to buy this art and just, give it to people. So to me, I have to have a connection, or even if I'm selling it to somebody else.
Wow, that's really interesting. Okay, next question. Let's see, what else? Well, we already answered that question. Through what venue do you both personally buy art yourselves? Is it galleries, fairs, auctions, artists directly?
Well, all of the above. I buy through my own gallery, of course, and then through those who have a reputable reputation. There are people in this industry that are unscrupulous, and so I try to avoid incidences where the work is not what it's represented to be. And I also buy through galleries because I believe in supporting the infrastructure. And that is that artists need to be supported, and galleries who are committed to developing the artists' careers are ones that really need to be supported. Artists, in most cases, truly just want to create their work and allow the galleries or a dealer to do the business part of things for them. And in working through galleries, we enable that to happen. So it's really important for people to understand, you know, the need to support the galleries. And also what's important about the way in which one purchases is it because it allows people like Alva, who's one of the top appraisers in the country, to, when they are working with museums, art collectors, and other institutions, there is documentation of those sales. And it allows her to assess the value of the artist's works. The appraisers don't create the market, they report the market. So if the work is being documented and purchased through reputable dealers and galleries, it allows the appraisers to do their work. And in turn, you know, the artists' careers develop further, and certainly the value of their works increase.
I totally agree with you on that, obviously.
Yes.
You're on a gallery.
Yes.
And what about you, Lillian?
What we like to do is build collections in the locale of the hospitals that we're working on. So I do internet research to begin with. And when I started at Charlottesville in 2003, I contacted McGuffey Art Center because there were a lot of artists in one place. And by the time I got there, there was a buzz, and I was escorted from studio to studio to make sure I didn't escape before everybody saw me. So that's a lot of what we do, and a lot of word of mouth. But I completely agree with you. There are 3 galleries, especially in Charlottesville, Chroma Art Projects, and Beth Nichols' gallery, and then Lynn Warren's gallery. And we work with them. They exhibit in changing art shows in our hospital. So we let the galleries exhibit their artists. It's a great partnership. But, you know, it's an impossible market right now. So you have to support the artists and the galleries, and also art centers like Alternative Art Spaces and McLean Project for the Arts, because it's too hard to find individual artists if you don't have shows and collections and themes. So, but it's also very important for me to have a relationship with the artists. So it works always, I think.
Yeah, and that's for those of you who are new to collecting or just interested in looking at more art. I mean, just going back to what we were saying, I mean, galleries are really the venue for that. I mean, every 6 or 7 weeks or every 2 months, there's new shows, new artists coming through, and they've already curated the best of the best. So you're going to come through and see fabulous works of art, and the artists are there. So you get to be around that energy, that creative energy, and meet the artists, learn about the process. So you know, I encourage all of you to check out more galleries. Make it more of a routine if you're interested in knowing more.
Also, there's a thoughtfulness about this exhibit, for instance, that you're not going to find in an individual artist studio. So I think it's the thought and the meaning behind what galleries are showing that's so critically important.
And how it hangs differently.
Right.
I mean, you're not going to see that in a studio. It's going to be in a rack a lot of times. So it's nice to sort of present it in such a way that it promotes the artist, and you get to know the artist in the process for a lot of these openings. So keep that in mind. Let's see. I guess maybe you answered this, but you know, what is the process like working with an art dealer or an art consultant? You know, what does it entail?
Well, I don't work with a lot of consultants or dealers, and I don't work with a lot of individuals. So I think my situation is probably a little different than it would be helpful in this setting, I think.
Well, for me, it really depends on what category, as I call it, the collector is in. That really dictates my approach, and I'm there to assist and guide. So if someone is a beginner, then you know, they are probably someone who has not, you know, developed their own aesthetic. They're just trying to fill wall space. So the education curve is far greater. For another person who's a casual collector who may buy 1 to 5 pieces per year, they're a little bit more informed. They may have begun to go to galleries and museums and expose themselves to art at a different level. And then we move on to what I call the avid collector. These are people who may purchase 5 to 10 works per year. They may have joined a collectors group. They are visiting galleries and museums, developing a relationship with my gallery or others or other consultants. And so, you know, they've developed their own aesthetic. And then we move on to what I call the master collectors. Those are people who are buying with an intent. They're very deliberate. You know, art is an emotional buy, but it should be an intelligent approach. So they are well informed, they've surrounded themselves with people like Alva and myself, I call it the professional art team, with a lawyer who manages art collections and estates, appraisers, art dealers, or other gallerists or art advisors. They are buying with the intent to loan their works to galleries, to private, not private, but to museums. They're acquiring the work to pass on wealth to their family members or to bequeath pieces to institutions. They may be buying with the intent of creating catalogs for educational purposes of their collection or create their own museums from their collection. So with all of those categories, my role with that collector varies in terms of, you know, what their particular needs are. So you find yourself being a very good listener and discerning about ways in which you can help them with their collecting goals.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned when you were just speaking, collectors group. What exactly is that?
Well, collectors groups are people who come together who are passionate about art and talk about it. They share book lists, they go to art galleries together, exhibitions together, they travel together to art fairs, and I see several of my clients who are here who are part of these art groups. And so they're very, very passionate people who come together because of their joy. And, you know, that's one way in which they connect and can share their art passion.
Mm-hmm. And do you know how people find each other? Is it just sort of word of mouth?
They usually find each other by visiting art exhibitions. You know, they talk amongst each other, and they've, you know, at my gallery they may meet, at an exhibition, at a university they may meet, or they may encounter each other at various venues, and then they become friends of a collector. Or, you know, I have suggested that some of them become part of a collector's group because, you know, they're looking to share their interests with someone else.
It's great. It makes a lot of sense. It makes it less intimidating, and everybody can share the process as they're learning. So
that was a far better answer than I did.
Oh, that's okay. Coming from it from different perspectives, so I understand.
Well, how do your clients work with you then? What's your process like?
Well, usually they approach me, and I remember the first time I worked with Martha Jefferson, I brought in a huge portfolio of work and just spread it all out on the table, and I said, this is the kind of artwork I think you should buy, but I don't think you should buy any of this artwork because it's not by local artists. But you can see the variety of media and scale and subject matter, and so that's usually how I work, or I'll do a PowerPoint and just show them what my thoughts are, and then listen to what they feel their institution needs. And then, you know, I just do several meetings, like at Martha Jefferson we met monthly. And the fascinating thing about that is everyone on my committee became avid collectors from the CEO down. He said he just has stacks of artwork on his floor. And some of the women on the committee said their husbands wanted them out because now they're buying art and they used to just buy jewelry. Well, that's good. But yeah, it's just wonderful. And the other interesting thing about Martha Jefferson is that we have 700 works of art in the collection, and they actually give docent tours twice a week. And what we do is put all of the artist's information so they can contact the artist directly. And it's really building a culture of collectors in the hospital, and it's reached out to the entire community. I mean, we've heard from gallery owners and artists that, oh, they saw, you know, my painting at Martha Jefferson and they came to my studio. So, and that's a real innovative, because you wouldn't think a hospital could do that. And even at NIH, we've had so many people tell me, I purchased the first original art I ever purchased in my life from this gallery, because I walked by it every day and I realized the show was coming down and I just couldn't live without it. So, and that's a very alternative area to, you know, start. But I think if people who want to collect, it's everywhere. I mean, you could go into the U.S. Botanic Garden and see an exhibit and ask the front desk who the artist is and look up the artist. So, you know, you really can find it anywhere you're looking, anywhere you find something that appeals to you.
Yeah, it's just a matter of asking.
Yeah.
That artist is accessible, how do I get to them?
Right.
You know, a lot of people are so intimidated by that. You know, like finding the artist and going up to them, but the artists want to engage you. They want to tell you about their piece. And that's some of the most rewarding part of it, is once you connect with the piece, once you hear the backstory and the narrative, that'll pull you in, and then you really want it. And then that's when you know you got to take it home.
I took a VP on a tour of galleries in Charlottesville, and he was the chief financial officer. And so we went through, and so many artists said, it's meant so much to me. I'm going to get emotional. I try not to. But by the end of the day, he said, I never knew there was so much thought behind everything that you've shown us. He said, how do I reject anything now? Because I know it means so much to the artist, and they're so committed, and the gallery owners are so committed. And I said, well, luckily, it's at the end of our project, so you know you don't have to worry too much about rejecting things at this point. But it was a life-changing experience for me.
I love it. Okay. Now, is there research for the average person required when they're about to purchase art? Like, what would you tell them to do when they're looking to invest, other than going with their gut? Is there something else that they should do?
I think you probably can answer that better than I can. I know things are a good value, and you can tell people, and we don't exhibit things that I feel are not good value. So, I mean, that's kind of the bottom line safeguard.
But yes, I know this may sound like a cliche, but you really should buy what you love. And so that's the first step, and that's the emotional part of it. And then you move on to the intellectual process of buying the art. And there you should become more discerning about, you know, examining the work closely, making sure that it's executed well, that it's been finished well. I mean, you know, I see a lot of art, and so my eye becomes a little finer tuned and a little bit more discerning about how well it's finished, how well it's framed. That really says a lot about the care that was taken to create it. And also, it's important to engage with the artists and read their resume and their bio. What you're looking for in that information is an indication that the artist is committed to being a professional artist. And this isn't to say that they can't work outside of the arts, but there needs to be a demonstration that they are committed to being a professional artist and not a hobbyist. I do not invest in artists who are hobbyists, the casual artist who may create one piece on occasion, but if I see, and an exhibition, they don't have to be involved in an exhibition every year, every other month, but there should be an indication in their resume and bio that they are committed, that they are productive, that they are participating in the arts on a professional level, that they are being featured in juried exhibitions. And you know, I don't have anything against art fairs, but there are different levels of fairs. There are those that you participate in simply because you pay a booth fee, and then there are others where you are juried in. And if I see an indication that you're juried in, then that is another sign to me that you're committed. Because all artists aren't at the gallery level. So we need to support those artists also. But those artists also need to demonstrate to the collectors that they are worthy of their attention. And so as they're on the path to becoming represented by a gallery, you know, and collectors are supporting them along that path as well, we need to look for those things so that we are sure that our monies are well spent. And it really, again, it goes back to what category the collector's in. For some, it may not be necessary to buy with that discernment. You simply want to fill your walls and you enjoy the piece. But if you're on a different path of collecting, those are the things that I advise, that you look for those things within the resume and in the bio that indicate that this is a professional artist.
Thank you. The next question is, how do you recommend that collectors care and maintain their collection over time in their particular pieces? And is there a particular you know, for flat pieces, there's a particular framing that you would recommend over others?
Well, it has to be to museum standards. So you use rice paper and front-end hinges and archival mapboard and backing board. And then at Martha Jefferson, we used a lot of museum glass because there was so much natural light. And then with our clients, what we do is develop a framing style with them. So the artwork can be moved from place to place to place. So we keep it very simple, use natural hardwoods. I just think, as you said, the best materials that you can possibly use to protect your investment, which is the artwork.
And is there upkeep required for a lot of these pieces?
At NIH, we take things apart every couple of years and clean the inside of the glass and just make sure it's in good shape and
Protect the piece itself.
Yes, and I fully agree, and I'd only like to add to that is that as the collectors, you are the caregivers of the work. And so with that, you know, be mindful of the need to preserve it. I manage and work with a lot of estates, and there are great stories where we discover these wonderful, valuable pieces in the collection that someone has, you know, been passed on through the family. And then the other side of that is where I encounter these really wonderful, valuable works of art that are deteriorating, that they were not cared for properly. They were in garbage bags under the stairs, and the moisture, you know, just deteriorated the works on paper, or they were shoved behind a sofa and no one knew it was there. I mean, all kinds of crazy stories. And I mean, like, these artists are like considered our master artists these days. So the works have no value because they just were not cared for properly. So, you know, be mindful of the fact that it's really important as artists when creating your work to use the best materials, as the collectors who are the caregivers of those works to, you know, be mindful of where they're hung in your house. I mean, our living environments and our work environments are, you know, the environments are for our own comfort, but we are living with other organic materials that need our care also. So, you know, try to be mindful of not putting your works on paper in your window and things like that. I have one client who, her children call her art collection the newspaper art collection, because she literally has a lot of works on paper, and she puts newspapers over them to protect them, because she has a lot of windows. And then when she has guests come over, she runs around, takes all the newspaper down. But her works on paper are pristine. So, it's another way to manage it. She doesn't want to rotate it, but she's found her own way to preserve it. So.
I love that.
At NIH, we had a blogger come review the collection. And he was remarking on, there were so many artists that he'd never heard of, and he was like, what, 20. And I said, we purchased this work, 25 years ago, and the artist isn't showing necessarily it. And he said, well, it looks like it's brand new. So to me, anything that I sell to a permanent collection needs to stay permanently as it originally was. And literally, we have things that are 25 years old that look like we hung them yesterday. So it is really important to protect the investment.
Now, for you in particular, showing art in hospitals, are there other like environmental considerations that you have to keep in mind when showing art there?
Well, we have a hard time showing two-dimensional art, and we had a problem in Stafford with infectious diseases. So there's a beautiful plein air community there. So we had these wonderful little paintings all throughout the hospital that people had done, and they were of local scenes, and in the hospital they just loved it. Say, oh, that's that yellow house on High Street, so it adds a whole nother level of enjoying the artwork. So we had to go through a rigorous defense of the oil paintings and the fact they didn't need to be glassed. So we got friends at NIH we have a paper that we wrote that said it's not, you wouldn't put work, we have to be careful about works, fabric works. Those have to be under glass. And there's also fire issues with fabric work. So there are certain restrictions, certainly in the hospital, but mostly it's common sense that you would frame it appropriately.
And the individual collector would have to deal with quite a bit of that.
No.
Unfortunately. Okay, so then I just want to throw out one fun question for both of you. If there was any piece in the world that you could own, regardless of value or whether or not anybody else owns it anymore or currently, is there one piece that you would just covet and love to have in your homes?
Well, there's a Degas and the Phillips of a woman getting out of the tub, and it's this huge pastel with just the most gorgeous mark quality, and there's this orange mark that defines her hip, and I just go to that pastel every single time I go there. It's one of the most remarkable works of art I've ever seen. So I take that one.
Okay.
Well, I really struggle with this question, and so I'm going to cheat a little bit because you said it's a magic wand. So if I had the magic wand, I would first buy a piece from each of the artists that I represent, because they are so worthy of our support, and we're on that path now. We haven't quite purchased one from everyone, but that would be my first wish. And then secondly, it would be a piece that Henry Tanner created that's in the collection at Hampton University. It is one of the most breathtaking works I've ever stood before. And I can't remember the name at the moment, I'm drawing a blank, but it's of this old man and a little boy in this field. And it is extraordinary. I think it's like the bagpiper or something like that. But it is, it's just mesmerizing. It really is mesmerizing, and I really do love it. So if I had my wish, it would be those two things.
Collection right there.
Oh, yeah.
I was sort of thinking about the question, obviously, because I asked it.
Yes.
And my favorite piece of art, which I'd love to own, is Alexander Calder's Circus,
Oh, yeah.
which is a traveling piece that he created that mimics the American circus. And it was one of the first performance pieces of art. So maybe I couldn't have that piece because he's not a part of it. But, you know, it's like we hold on to these pieces of art in our minds. And, you know, they become so fascinating in the larger cultural scheme of things, but they also hit these personal notes. So, you know, just think about that for those of you who are considering collecting of like, what pieces are you drawn to historically? You know, and follow that and see where it leads you to in contemporary local artists, perhaps. So before I opened up the stage for questions for you both, is there anything else that you want to add in this that you would recommend for like a novice collector or developed collector? Anything that we might have missed?
I think just really go everywhere. Go everywhere and look at everything, and get on the internet and read blogs and educate yourself and find out what you like and what you don't like, and because it's really your expression. So you really don't have to be told by anyone else what to collect or what you're interested in. And I think the idea of collecting anything because you think it's going to increase in value is the craziest thing in the world, because it's art. You know, you find other ways to increase your stocks. You know, so I just think that's kind of nonsensical. Though I do think artists need to be professional, and their work needs to be crafted in a way it is going to, you know, exist 50 years from now or 100 years from now. So I would just say educate yourself as to what you enjoy. And I think your suggestion of thinking about works that you've always been drawn to, kind of setting you a guidepost, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, it's all looking.
Yeah.
Developing your own.
And read, and you know, there's so many great blogs out there, and so many alternative spaces and pop-up galleries, and I mean, it's just, and artist communities like, you know, Red Dirt and Ellen and those guys out in Mount Rainier. There's a lot to see. There's no reason not to see all of it.
Well, I would like to say that, you know, art is an appreciable asset, and direct collectors drive the market. You know, as much as the galleries will place an artist before them, if the collectors aren't supporting that artist, then the career goes nowhere. So there is this beautiful dance between the galleries and the artists and the collectors that takes place. I'd also like to add that, yes, buy what you love, and also surround yourself with that team, depending on where you are in the collecting process. The team, again, being the art dealers, the gallerists, the appraisers, and the attorneys. I can't emphasize that enough. If you have 3 of any one item, then you are a collector. If you have 3 of any one fine art piece, then you're a collector of fine art. Because a lot of people say, no, I'm not a collector, and then I go to their home and I go, yeah, you really are. And you know, sometimes people don't have a sense of knowing how valuable what they're living with is. And so we live in a world that does place value on art. And so we need to be mindful of that as we continue to build these wonderful art collections.
Okay, so those were my questions, but I want to open it up to all of you. You know, just hit us with it. Whatever you got, any questions, any burning question that you might have brought to the conversation, now's your chance to ask our experts. Yes?
I have a question about price. How do you know whether or not an artist is overcharging for a piece of work? What kind of research should you do?
Well, I think that is a really good question, and that begins with research. If the artist is represented by a gallery, you could approach the gallery. There's a lot of information on the internet that tends to be very helpful. I think the artist's resume and biography would also lend hints as to whether the work is overpriced. I mean, it's very subjective to some extent, although there is an equation that I use when I work with artists, and I focus primarily on emerging artists. So, you know, I make a lot of assessments based on what their past sales history is, who has worked with them before, and that being other galleries where they've exhibited, whose collections they're in. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into the bottom line figure. So it may seem arbitrary, and for some it may be, but for me it is not. You know, it's a very concerted effort in creating a price that the artist approves of, and then again we hope that, you know, the collectors will agree to that price and support that.
I agree. I think you also have to look at if the work is well crafted and well framed. And you know, when I purchase for my clients, I just know in my gut that's either way too expensive or a really good value. So, you know, it's easy for me to say because I've been in the business for 30 years. But I think talk to people. I mean, there's really, like you said, a lot of information, and you can look at other places that are showing the artist's work. There's really a lot of places you can go, I think.
And I'd just like to add one other thing to that is look at the work or the prices of that artist's contemporary. That also can provide hints as to whether or not the work is priced in line with what it should be. And that's another thing that I assess when creating prices. I think this gentleman behind me.
Yeah, I actually had a question. Hey guys, my name is Mark William Bryan. Peace. I'm a painter myself. I'm going to be actually throwing an art show off of Galerie in Champlain. We're going to be working with Capital Pedicabs. We're using their garage space for an art show. What I'm going to do is, well, actually what me and my buddy are going to do, we're reaching out to American University, Washington Studio School, and a couple of other colleges. We're reaching out to their art departments. I just left AU today, and I was visiting some of the undergraduate studios, and there was like really impressive stuff in there. And I was going to ask you, how should you gauge like undergraduate work? Like, you know, because in the past couple of meetings for the art show, you know, we've been through exit strategy and like entrance strategy, like pricing, like as far as like the door, because it's going to be for 3 days. We're going to have a party one day, artist talk another day, and critiquing on another day. But we haven't started to speak about pricing the students' work yet. So how would you go about that? Like, what is the ballpark range for that? And these are the guys who don't have any gallery representation. For what I know, they, you know, Lord knows for how long they've been painting. But I'm just gonna go and take the most impressive things, you know, and you know.
Well, I never respond to questions like that, because that would be very unfair. I'm not standing before a piece to make an assessment, and it's a very deliberate approach. I take a very deliberate approach to that and a very serious approach to pricing. So I would not be able to answer that question for you.
I agree.
new house. It's a very neutral palette. I have some art pieces. I put them on the side. The furniture I have is not to keep. And I'm not sure where to start. So do I figure out the pieces of furniture and then the art to support it, or both? Have you any thoughts on that?
Our work first. I think whatever you fall in love with, that sets the tone for everything else. And
That's what I've heard.
fall in love with it. I
Yeah.
mean, really.
I always jokingly say, if you've come to me to help you match art with your sofa, I'm not the gallery for you. Because I sell beautiful fine art, and that's what I want you to come to me and to help you connect with. So I'm so happy you said that the furniture is very secondary to that process.
Oh, it's a non-plus.
Yes, because I think what you will find is as you begin to buy what you love, one piece will lead you to another and another and another, and it will all come together. And you will see the connectedness between one piece. It may be a certain color that you'll find that you're drawn to. It may be a certain form, a certain theme, a certain style, and it will just evolve organically and very beautifully. So I would love to help you if you would love help with that. And part of that process begins with my coming to your home and walking through so I can get a sense of your aesthetic. And then, as I said, one of the things that you must possess, and we both said that, is just to be a good listener. And with that, that helps us narrow down the pool, because the pool of artists is so great. We are so lucky to live in an area of really talented, really serious artists. And I always say I wish I could duplicate myself many times over so that I could make myself available to the number of talented artists that I have to turn away. So I'm really happy to be a part of helping to develop this advisory, because it's another venue through which artists can get the assistance they need, to find the collectors to support them, and have their works placed in homes and healthcare facilities that will, help to further their career.
And I was just going to add to that, if you're starting with blank space, if you're the curator, if you choose to do it, or if you take, professional help, I would say that as you lay it out, you'll see that you're creating a piece yourself. The works read together as a whole. So don't get stuck in one layout. Live with it, and then move some pieces around, adjust it, because you'll see certain pieces pick up other palettes, they pull up other imagery. The pieces read as a whole. So be creative. You're the one who's collected these pieces for a reason, and let it speak as a whole.
Let me ask, may I ask one more thing, and perhaps you can weigh in. One of the walls in the major room is all glass, and it looks out onto wetlands and bay, and so the light changes all day long, and it's very spectacular. So I'm thinking, so do I expand the theme of nature, because clearly nature is number one. Huh?
You don't need art there.
Oh, yeah. And someone has said exactly that. And so with the limited space that I have, I'm just spending some time with the room. And I'm spending some time with the light. And I have been pushed to choose. And if I'm being pushed to choose, I'll push back.
Yes.
Right. So I just really wanted people to weigh in, because this is such a big thing. And I know it's an issue of the heart. And I wanted to make sure I was comfortable with
I feel
myself.
my subconscious is so much smarter than my conscious mind. So I just let my instincts take over. And I would say try things in your home. We sell things out of our changing art show, and we'll let people borrow them and see how they work in the space. And that's especially in a room like that, because we have a painting at NIH that we've owned for many years. And the theory in healthcare now is rather prescriptive, that you don't want to ever offend anyone. So you want to make sure everything's a photograph of a sunny day with a path and a water feature, you know. And I just don't believe that.
Yeah.
And we have a painting by, gosh, your name escapes me, but it looks like an ancient wall, and it has these gold triangles on it, and it's just gorgeous. And it's on the second-story space, and it changes. The triangles change as the light goes over the hospital. We have people that just gravitate to that. It's like an icon to them, and it's right near the chapel, so it's a real serene space, and it's never looked better. We've owned it for so long that the light changing will change dramatically what you have. And metallics are really fascinating that way.
Thank you. Thank you.
So practically speaking, what about the issue of limited space? I want to leave some space around pieces that I love, and I don't want paintings piled in a corner.
That's tough, because I believe in negative space too. I mean, I think the worst thing you can do is overhang. And in a hospital, when it's stressful, it drives me insane when there's either nothing or it's all overhung. Do you have a flat file or a portfolio where you could?
No. I put stuff out, where I want to see it, I guess. But I do have like scrapbooks, but that's a limited thing for
Right.
books, not
That's tricky.
wall spaces.
Yes, it is, because collectors, especially master collectors, continue to want to collect. So these are some of the things that you can do, what I encourage. One, you can let some of the work rest, which is another good approach to preservation, and store it, and then hang new works. If there are works that you feel that you've outgrown, sometimes people have been collecting for a number of years, and they've outgrown the aesthetic. And so you can donate. There are many nonprofit organizations that have art as their part of their fundraising. And so you can make a wonderful contribution to a nonprofit organization.
Or a hospital.
Or a hospital. And exactly. And or you can gift it to perhaps a family member or friend who's admired it over the years. And so there's lots of different things you can do. I agree. Walking into a room where the art is overhung is overwhelming, and it's hard to allow your eye to rest and appreciate the work because it's so crowded. So I agree. The work you need the negative space around it, and to be able to really cast your eye on it and focus on it and appreciate it.
And that's how it speaks to each other.
We had a question just back there.
Two questions. One is on framing style. I just wondered I'm very eclectic, so I don't have a whole lot of consistency. So I just wondered what your points of view are on that. And the other is sizes and shapes. Just for the non-artist collector, are there some guideposts for that? And then my last question is, you said something about it being an impossible market, and I wondered if you could explain what that meant.
Did I say impossible market?
Yes.
Well, arts and healthcare has never been better. So I've been busier in the past 5 years than I've been in 30. So why? Because I work in healthcare, and healthcare is becoming more and more important, and also more service oriented. So everyone can give you a certain level of clinical care, but it's patient satisfaction. And a beautiful hospital, Martha Jefferson has one of the highest patient satisfactions in the nation. And we actually had a patient who didn't want to leave. I mean, they actually had to get the valet and get his car and escort him out because they had music, live music, and it's just a beautiful vistas of the mountains. Never got what your question was. Why is it an impossible market? I think it's tough. Galleries are closing all over the place, and I think people circumvent galleries to go to the artist directly. And to me, the relationship has to be between the gallery and the artist, and there has to be respect there, because I shouldn't be able to talk an artist into going around their gallery, and nobody should. But I think it is a very difficult market. And as far as your framing question goes, I think to me the simpler the better. You let the art speak just by keeping your framing. I mean, really, I've used a soft white archival mat for 30 years and just really strong hardwood frames, and you just keep it so simple because, you know, a colored mat and then ornate frames, you don't even see the art anymore. It becomes decoration and then it loses whatever meaning it had. When I juried the show at Torpedo Factory, it was like, oh my gosh. And some work really was not bad, but you couldn't see it for the terrible framing.
I agree. For me, the framing is very secondary to the piece. You know, it's there to support it on the wall, but it shouldn't detract from the art itself. So I'm a minimalist by nature, and so for me, the framing or whatever surrounds the work should be very minimal. So, and what was yours? You had another question.
Sizes and shapes.
I don't think you should be restricted by that. I mean, I have really large pieces, some small. Again, it's about what I love in the art, so that really dictates it. Sometimes, depending on your living space or where you're going to hang the work, it could be an office space, that might be restrictive. But I've found that sometimes in a small room, a large piece can be very commanding, you know. So it really depends on what you know, how you want it to be displayed in the home.
I think there's one more question here.
I like the language that you all use, developing your own aesthetic. Now, I would like to tell all my art friends that's what I'm doing. But I need to be able to explain that. It just sounds so good. So, when you say that one is developing one's own aesthetic, what does that mean, Myrtis?
What it really means is you're finding what you love in the art, what resonates with you,
Okay.
what you're drawn to.
Okay.
And basically, I think that's what it means.
You'll know it when you develop it. It's already there. It's already there. You just
I think I already have it. You know, I know that I'm drawn to music. I know I'm drawn to landscapes. I know that I'm drawn to abstract pieces. I mean, you have things that I'm drawn to, but I didn't know I was developing.
Well, I'm glad you came away with something. Catchphrase, that's right. Over here?
I guess it's a dual question. You mentioned some unscrupulous dealers, and you've also mentioned having an attorney several times, and I'm wondering, what do you mean by unscrupulous dealers aside from the internet Nigerians who want you to cash a check?
Yes.
But are there other unscrupulous dealers,
Yeah,
and what does an attorney do?
Well, the unscrupulous dealer question first. Unfortunately, and this is probably, it's well known, that there are times when, you know, a print which may have been has not been created by the artist it's been attributed to. There are bogus Picassos everywhere. I had a friend who actually called me and told me she was buying a Picasso at the flea market. I said, are you crazy? You know? Oh no, she had purchased it. And I said, think about it. Who would sell a Picasso at a flea market?
No one.
And I heard this dead silence, and I went, take it back. And she goes, he told me I couldn't get my money back.
Oh no.
So unscrupulous. Use common sense. That's why I started off by saying, buy through a legitimate source. Buy from a reputable dealer. And do your research. I mean, not everyone that hangs their shingle out is there with good intent. So, you know, ask around. I mean, this is a very small community, and the art community is even smaller. So if people have a bad reputation, sometimes people are very polite and they won't say anything, but if you ask, they will tell you. You know, I fortunately have not encountered an unscrupulous dealer in probably 15 plus years, and that person is out of business, and well, it should be. And then as far as the attorney is concerned, the role that the attorney can play with your estate, and especially those who specialize in art collections, and Larry Frazier is one in the city who's a very well-known attorney that does that, is because the laws that surround that are very different from other things that you may have, other possessions you may have in your collection. And the way in which your collection is handled may be very different. If, for example, you bequeath works to certain institutions, museums, or family members, you know, you want those things carried out, and your attorney can help you with that.
One other question, if I may. The role of the internet. It's so new. I'm wondering what your experience has been, or what you recommend. That's awesome. Other than that,
I couldn't do nearly the work I do without the internet. It just allows me to go into a city that I'm totally unfamiliar with and just start at the top and go all the way down. I mean, it changed my life. It really did.
I find it very useful too, but I use it with a level of caution because of my past experience and things not always being represented as they should be. And so it's a great resource for many things. Like I'm working on a project now, I emailed Alvin this afternoon, because I'm looking for young African American printmakers. So, and I'm struggling to find some in the area outside of the ones that I know. And that's because, you know, even with the great pool of artists that we represent through the gallery, there are certain times when the project may dictate that I need other artists. And so that's where I am now with this project. I'm looking for artists outside of my stable. So the internet was very helpful. I did look around today and used it for researching for that. My primary focus, but not sole focus of my gallery is African American art. And so I'm really challenged in that area because a lot of African American artists are not documented in the way that other artists have been documented over the years. And so the internet has been really helpful in my finding these artists that have been obscure for many years, and other things have helped too in terms of auction houses and so on and so forth. So I do rely on the internet a lot, but I also have an extensive library of books that I rely on. I call appraisers and other dealers to also help me in my research.
Okay. Before we close tonight, I just wanted to, first of all, thank both of you tremendously for adding so much to this conversation and sharing your expertise. And I hope all of you walked away with some inspiration and a few more tips that you might not have known about starting and developing your collection. But before we close, I just wanted to know if either of you wanted to share anything about projects that are coming up that you're both working on, events that you're putting together, shows at your gallery, that you could just share with people here.
Well, our current exhibition, which I'm really proud of, is in collaboration with the Walters Art Museum, which is also in Baltimore. My gallery is located in Baltimore. The Walters exhibition, the title is Revealing the African Presence in Renaissance Europe. And the exhibition in my gallery is the contemporary response. So 8 contemporary artists have created works that are inspired, influenced by the Renaissance paintings. The Renaissance works features Africans in various occupations, or not occupations, but in various aspects of the European society. They were slaves, but they were also diplomats. They were tradesmen. They were free people and servants. And so, oh, thank you. One of them is a very good client of mine. So this is the photograph that's on this face, which I really, really love, is a woman who was a servant. And I'm sorry, a slave. This was recently documented that she was a slave. I've been working with the Walters for over a year on this collaboration, and throughout the course of that, up until recently, she was noted as a servant. But just before the exhibition opened, there was documentation found that actually said that she was a slave. So she was a slave. We do not know her name. And so the exhibition is really exciting. Oh, I love it. Thank you. This is the invitation to our exhibition, and this woman's face appears here. This is a contemporary response to the Renaissance painting. And the title of this piece is Wings Not Meant to Fly by Jamia Richmond Edwards. So I wanted to share that with you. And then the other project that I'm working on is with the State Department, who just purchased one of Jamia's pieces, and it's going to Dakar, Senegal. So we're really excited about that. So that's what we're busy about, is the art and loving it.
Well, we're working on developing 2 apps for our collection. At NIH, we're working on developing a virtual app so that a patient who's bedridden can actually walk through the collection, and then when he clicks on, or she clicks on the painting, it'll bring up information about the artist and also a video if we get to that point. So, you know, there's also all kinds of security issues at NIH, and it's a federal building, so we're having trouble getting funding, and then also working on the layouts. They don't want us to publish the blueprints, but we're also doing a self-guided walking tour at NIH that's been really wonderful for people who have a lot of time on their hands. There's a tour sign next to each painting that has the artist statement and all the information about the artist. So we're very happy that that's my volunteer, Maureen Hansen, has been instrumental, and she's an editor, and I am not. And so, you know, we just could never get to it until she started volunteering with me. And then at Martha Jefferson in Charlottesville, we're developing an app that'll read a barcode with a smartphone, because labeling's really tricky in a hospital. You have surfaces that have to be wiped down, and it's expensive and hard to keep up. So the same kid from JMU is helping us develop a barcode app that you can read, and then you can go directly to the artist's website. So yeah, it's really fun. That's why I'm so in love with the internet. Gosh, there's just nothing in the world you can't do. Though I never buy anything off the internet. I mean, I really just do research and find out what we can move forward as far as the arts and healthcare goes.
Well, thank you both for joining us, and thank you all for coming this evening. If you want to learn more about the projects that Myrtis and Lillian are working on, just find us afterwards, and you can ask me about the gallery and our art advisor as well. Thank you. Thank you. And the artists are here as well. Yes. We're wonderful.